Good afternoon, everyone. It's 4 p.m. Yes, a little past 4 p.m. And I know I'm standing between you and the happy hour. So let's make this worth it. And if I do my job well, maybe we'll toast to IDPs. And if I don't do it, well, we definitely need another drink. So win-win either ways, right? Hello, everyone. I'm Pragya Jaiswal. I lead the platform engineering team at Paxos, a fintech company that's based out in New York here. And today, I'm here to talk about internal developer portals, not from the lens of technology or features, but from the perspective of adoption. So I'd like to do a quick audience poll here. Just by a show of your hand, how many of you here or your teams have actually built an IDP? Great. Now keep your hands up if the IDP adoption, if the developers have been using it day to day consistently as you had envisioned that they would. Well, there has to be some hands up. OK, I see there. Exactly. This is what we are here to unpack today. And hopefully, something of what I speak might resonate with you, and you would take some of these things back. So what I'm going to talk about, the adoption challenge. What do I mean by that? Right? Building the portal is straightforward. Actually, let me correct that. Building the portal is easy. Listening to the keynote today from Ganesh and Anish this morning, I was telling them just before this talk that I wish we were onboarding now, if it just takes minutes to get the IDP going. So imagine spending months and days getting the IDP up and not seeing the adoption that you'd like to see. So what are the reasons? The hard part is the adoption. I'd like to give an analogy here. It's like getting a gym membership for my husband in my house. It was very easy for me to get the gym membership. It's been years. I haven't been able to get him to actually go and work out. So portals are similar. Building the portal, getting the scorecards, getting the catalog, getting scaffolding, check, check, check. That's easy. But if you have to drive adoption, that's where the real challenges come up. It's an uphill climb. So before we actually dive into the session, what do I want you to take away, and what are we going to talk about during this session? We're going to talk about identifying some of the adoption blockers, and then also we'll talk about some of the strategies to overcome these adoption blockers. Then we'll also learn why internal developer relations and change management are critical, as much as the tech itself, even so that if you skip them, then the portal might not stick. And then we'll talk about how do we weave internal developer portals into our daily workflows so they feel natural and not bolted on. And then we'll talk a little bit about reframing scorecards, making them into something empowering rather than being punitive. So before I get into all of those details, let me set some current context on why we at Paxos invested in internal developer portals. So Paxos is a fintech company. What that means is we have high regulatory and operational demands. What that means is we need to have speed, and at the same time, we cannot compromise on reliability and compliance. So at the time, there were a couple of problems we were seeing. Onboarding new service and engineers took us days. It took about 14 PRs. That was not fun. Then we did not have best practices applied consistently across all our teams and services. We also did not have a single view of ownership or dependencies. Now, the internal developer portal for us aimed to solve these three problems: speed up our developer workflows, standardize our practices, and improve visibility. There was also a human side to this. And what was the human side? What we wanted to do was simplify our platform so that it frees up our developer time to actually work on the product and not worry about the workflows or finding the right information. We wanted to reduce friction and remove the frustration from the developers' lives. So we chose Cortex, and we have our journey with Cortex going for 2.5 years now. And we built our catalog, we built our scorecards, we built our scaffolder, and everything looked perfect on paper. And we were pretty happy with the technical implementation. But to our surprise, the adoption lagged, and we couldn't point our finger to what was the reason. And that's when we started diving deep into looking into what were some of the adoption blockers. So what we did was we ran a survey to get some adoption metrics. Surprisingly, only about 40% of the people in the engineering org knew that our internal developer portal existed. And out of the 40%, only 30% of the people actually were active users. About half of them complained about metadata being outdated. If I'm being honest, I'm surprised it was just half. Considering the number of reorgs we have had, ownership gets messy. We were just talking about ownership. So that was another problem. And then YAML was widely disliked. Let's just say it was not the love language of the developers. Core point, what do I want to get to here? The platform can exist, your internal developer portal can exist, but if the experience is clunky or trust is low, adoption won't stick. So the real problem, adoption issues are not about missing features, they're not about technical implementation, they're about human factors, trust, workflows, habits, and culture. Now let's dig into some of these reasons, some of the root causes why we see lag in adoption for IDPs. It's rarely technical, like I already called out. So when you run the POC, the developers see the promise of onboarding a service really fast. They see the promise of finding information really quickly. They see the promise that ownership will be defined and they would not be chasing people asking who owns this service and who is responsible for this service and who do we page, things like that. But what happens in reality post-launch is when the reality sets in. That's when the difference between sometimes adoption feels heavier weight than they expect it to be. So the expectations and the perceived value does not match. For example, scaffolding. If the developers are used to having some processes like repo cloning, and if your scaffolding process is not 10 times improved from what they're used to, they're going to go back and use their older ways, older methods. Same thing with service catalog. If it already exists in Confluence, if it already exists in Slack, and you have not made it easy for them to find the information, they're going to fall back to their older methods of doing things. So key point here, until the portal delivers real dramatic improvement, developers revert to familiar workflows. The next thing, scorecards acting as big brother metrics. What does that mean? I lead the platform engineering team, and I absolutely love scorecards. My team members love scorecards, right? They are meant to standardize, they are meant to reduce risk, and they are meant to improve visibility. But what happens in reality? The developers perceive it as punitive, and they perceive it as judgmental. And I was not thinking of this example when I prepared this deck, but something just came to my mind right before walking on the stage. And no offense to anybody here, I'm an Asian Indian and a mom to a 14-year-old kid. And every time he comes back with a scorecard saying, hey, I'm proud that I got an A, my first response is, okay, but why not an A+? And I totally understand how the developers must feel when we look at the scores and the scorecards. So it's always the judgment that comes across and not the encouragement. So the developer perception really matters here. What are some of the challenges with these developer perception? So misaligned incentives, what do I mean by that? If we don't tie our scorecards to OKRs, there are misaligned incentives. What does that mean? Developers are focused on shipping features. They're not focused on improving scores. So if the scorecards is not really, if you're penalizing them for not fixing the gaps with the scorecards, and instead they're focused on shipping features, there will be disengagement. Also distrust. If the data is inaccurate from the scorecard or feels unfair, that also builds resistance from the developers. So scorecards should be more of an encouragement and not punitive or judgmental. Data. I think we had multiple talks talking about how important data is. Your trust and data credibility becomes very important. It's garbage in, garbage out. We had one of our panel members talk about that earlier today. Portal is only as good as its data. So outdated ownership, stale dependencies, missing integrations. If we do any of these things, it's very easy to lose trust from our developers. Once the developers stop trusting the data, they stop opening the portal at all. Without credible data, portal collapses its value. This is one of the most important factors, in my opinion, and which is what I think we saw a lot in Paxos. Launching the portal isn't enough. We need to treat it like a product. I know there was a roundtable session that was run, which also included something about IDP as a product. So what happens? You launch your developer portal, they go live, and then you don't do anything for its evolution. So they stagnate, they remain static, and they become irrelevant. What are some of the key gaps? If it is static, one-off initiatives, portals are launched but not really worked on, they become stagnant. If they're not integrated into your daily workflows, if you're not using portal metrics, if you're keeping them away from our operational reviews, that starts becoming like a side tool and not one of your key tools that is used in your engineering organization. And if there is no internal marketing, that is a key piece. If you don't have demos, if you don't have success stories, if you don't have your champions, if you don't have your local champions spreading the word, talking about the momentum that they have seen with their IDP, that becomes like a gap. If there are no adoption metrics, we measured the launch, but we are not measuring the adoption moving forward, that adds another gap. And then, if there's no feedback loop, developers need a way to come and give you feedback on what are things that are missing. They need to understand that you as a platform engineering team or owner of the internal developer portal are going to keep improving and fix the pain points that the developers are seeing. Similar, in line with that, if there's no roadmap, if they don't have future visibility into what's coming next. So these are all things that are required. A product mindset becomes definitely important. So product portals must be living, evolving products, not one-time launches. Change management, organization maturity. What does that mean? Teams aren't uniform. They're all at different maturity levels. Some of the teams need lightweight scaffolding. Some teams want heavy automation. Think about it this way. Rolling out one size fits all, if I give a shoe that is of the same size to all of you, nobody's going to be happy and everybody is going to walk funny. So that's not going to work. So without having staged onboarding or champion, it breeds passive resistance among the developers. Overlapping tools. So this was another one of the issues that we did not anticipate. Developers ask, don't we already have this? And when they say, don't we already have this, they probably mean Confluence or they mean cloning repos. Examples, catalog. Don't we already get this information in Wiki? Yes, we do, but how easy is it? Scorecards. There will be some overlap with maybe Datadog scorecards or SLO, SLA dashboards that exist there. Scaffolding. Teams probably already have templates that they're used to using. So unless the portal makes it really easy, unless it reduces friction, and unless there is about 10x improvement, overlapping tools will be seen as a friction point. Similar to the one-size rollout that we talked about earlier, persona targeting misalignment is another common problem. Portals don't really serve everyone equally. What does that mean? Primary users are people like us, platform engineers, SREs, tech leads who own services. If it is pitched to everyone the same way, equally, the developers are going to not feel the same. They won't see the same value because they are focused on shipping features and not driving adoption. Secondary users, you have your security team, you have your compliance teams. They push policies, but they don't drive adoption. So it's a common misstep that rolling portals out as one tool for everyone will work well. So better targeted enablement, that is scaffolding for probably new hires, scaffolding for services, for teams who are onboarding new services, that is a better approach to move forward with. There is, so basically targeted enablement when you launch an internal developer portal. These are some of the industry-wide patterns that I kind of put together over the last couple of years, talking to some of the different teams and different organizations, right? IDPs, sometimes we tend to over-engineer early. Sometimes all we need is a simple problem and find a use case and find a solution to that. Change management is overlooked. We have to understand that adoption is not driven by feature releases. Again, like we talked about, there's no feedback loop. Platform teams, faulty approach. When I say faulty approach, what does that mean? We start acting as gatekeepers. We should be enablers, not acting as gatekeepers. We need to provide a self-service layer for enablement. Portals are treated as static. Again, not having a roadmap, not having a support, lacking onboarding. So I just want to recap all the potential IDP adoption blockers that we just discussed. And I've just put it in a do's and don'ts format, so it's easy to recap. What should we do? Start small with clear use cases. An example in your organization can be scaffolding. Integrate into your existing workflows, integrate into your CI process, or integrate into your operational reviews that you have going on regularly. Focus on high leverage personas. It could be your leadership who care a lot about your DORA metrics, who care a lot about your SLOs that your teams have, right? Or it could be your platform engineers who care about standardization, who care about database migrations, what version are all our databases on. So target your personas, have a narrow focus group. Build trust and then evolve to governance. It's very important to build trust initially. Provide onboarding support and roadmap transparency. Keep your developers up to date on what's coming next. What are the next things that we are working on? What are some of the pain points that we have identified? Don't treat portal as a static repository. And then again, feedback. Maintaining continuous feedback loops for iteration. So ignoring user input after launch, please don't do that. So what did we do at Paxos once we identified all these blockers to the IDP adoption? We went into the diagnose and course correct mode. When adoption stalls, don't scrap the portal. Relaunch it with a product mindset. That's what we did. And when I say diagnose, what did we actually do? We diagnosed it with usage analytics. We figured out what are the features that are being used, what are the features that are not being used, what are the pain points that developers are seeing in using the developer portal today. When is it that the developers taper off using? When do they drop off from using the portal? And then we paired this usage analytics with some of the user feedback that we got through interviews. What did devs expect when we ran the POC? What did they actually get? Where was the gap there? So all the information, the data analytics that we had and the interviews from the developers actually gave us a lot of insight. And how did we course correct? We aligned our incentives. We tied our scorecards to engineering OKRs. Reliability, if that's important, incident management, if migration is important. So we tie our scorecards to OKRs. We started taking developer feedback, interview developers to uncover expectations, where are the pain points, usage analytics, I just talked about it, and then we embedded it in our workflows. What do I mean that we embedded it in our workflows? We triggered scaffolding in our CI/CD process. We built a tool which was easy for the developers to use, integrated it with Slack, which was using Cortex behind the scenes. We also built a champion network. We found a team that we could work with. We worked with them, we paired with them, and then we used them to promote and actually talk about how using the IDP or how using a scorecard actually helped them. And that became like a very good way of promoting it with our developer network. And then what did we do? We relaunched it with a product mindset. What were our focus areas? We started small. We found a high impact use case. We began with a use case like scaffolding. I was mentioning earlier, onboarding a new service used to take us 14 PRs. So we knew the developers were not happy with the way we were onboarding a new service. So we took a small use case and then implemented it in our workflows here. We defined success metrics. We looked at what's the time to launch a service. We looked at what are the number of services that were onboarded using this new workflow. And then we also looked at developer NPS scores. So we treated the portal as a product. Along with this, we paired it up with building awareness and evangelism. We announced it via internal blogs, Slack channels. We had our teams that paired with us and shared their success stories. And then we also identified team champions within every individual team who would come to something what we called as Cortex clinics. And I'll talk about it a little bit later. We also integrated it into our daily workflows. We linked our catalog to PR templates and CI/CD pipelines. We automated scaffolding triggers in GitHub Actions. And then we used Slack bots for updating our data, keeping our data fresh. And then we also worked on ensuring data quality. How did we do that? Data quality and ownership, we passed the ownership of maintaining the data quality to the teams itself. We assigned this to the teams so they maintain the freshness of the data through automated systems. We use Slack bots to actually do that. And then we provided a lot of training and documentation materials. We had FAQs, we had office hours, we had quick start videos, guided workflows. We hosted monthly Cortex clinics where we would actually take input from our teams on what are some of these issues and pain points that they're working on, and how can we pair with them? How can we enable them to actually work on things that can be catered specifically to their own teams? And that actually worked like a charm. And then we opened our continuous feedback loop. We ran a quarterly survey. It's a developer experience survey, but we have a targeted section just for our internal developer portal. So we gather feedback on adoption, we gather feedback on pain points, and then we actually acted on those input that we received from our developers. Along with gathering input, we also shared adoption metrics transparently with the teams. And then finally, we actually worked on reframing the scorecards. I should have actually said rebrand scorecards, not reframing. So we started calling them as service health dashboard rebranding. What we did was we replaced scores with operational readiness or risk awareness. So language really matters there. We made them actionable. So we included one-click fixes. We had direct links so that it would help developers to actually go and resolve the gaps. And then we started rewarding improvements rather than having it like a wall of shame. So if the teams were making improvements significant in their service health, those were being called out as a spotlight in our town halls or all-hand meetings. And then we also started explaining why. We tied metrics to the real impact. So those were some of the things we did to rebrand our scorecards. And then additionally, we also needed to work on shifting our mindset for the leadership. We presented to them as an empowerment model. We showed them the business outcomes. Like DORA metrics, our deployment frequency has gone from X to Y. Our MTTR has gone from X to Y. Those are the kind of things that leadership is definitely interested in. It was very easy for them to find what was the SLO impact from an incident that a particular team saw. So we tied those initiatives, which helped us shift the leadership mindset. So I'll just wrap up here. Some of the key lessons: adoption challenges are about people, they're not about missing features. Treat portals like products, with marketing, with metrics, with iteration. Focus on developer-first value. Focus on reframing the tools from punitive to empowering. Start small, measure, and scale deliberately. Transform an underused portal into a true enabler of velocity, reliability, and developer satisfaction, and that's what we did at Paxos. I did not include the metrics for before and after comparison because I wanted to say it here. 100% of our engineering team is aware of the internal developer portal existence right now. We have about 70% active users. We still have work to drive it up. And we have about 60% metadata data quality issue. I mean, people who are happy with the data quality currently. Again, there's still improvement to be made, but we did see significant improvement from where we started and how we relaunched it with the product mindset. If I have to point out 3 things for you to take away from here: identify primary personas in your organization. Identify a high-impact use case that matters to them and start building on it. Pick one high-value feature and then integrate into your daily workflows. And then measure adoption, gather feedback before you actually start the scaling. Thank you. I think we have some time for questions.
Let's check if it's on.
Hello. All right. You mentioned metrics a lot on how you were measuring developer adoption, but can you share how you got those metrics? Were they baked into Cortex? Did you have to code it yourself? Something else?
So we had a couple of different methods of doing that. We got qualitative data as well as quantitative data. We started getting adoption metrics from Cortex itself, tracking how many users are actually logging in, what are the scorecards that they're using, and then we paired it up with qualitative data that we gathered through our surveys. And then based on that, we had an analysis on how we gathered the metrics of adoption.
Thank you.
Thanks.
If you just had to pick one method that stood out through this journey, what would you say was the most effective method for doing stakeholder engagement?
The product mindset. Thinking about launching the IDP with a product mindset.
How did that translate in a tactical sense?
So we didn't just launch the IDP and expect everyone to work equally, expect it to work equally for everyone. How we started out was we started out with a narrow set of use cases that worked with a small set of people. And then we started socializing on what are some of the next versions are going to include, like a release newsletter. These are some of the next set of features that will be coming up. So as we were releasing features, we were tracking the adoption to those features, and then we were also looking at what are some of the next set of features that we should be releasing with our next release. So that's how we were building our roadmap. So we had like a clear roadmap on what are we going to hit every quarter and what can the developers expect by end of Q4, or what should they expect in the next year, what should be working. So that really helped us, because then developers were excited about, hey, what can we provide the input, or what input can we provide so that it can be included in the roadmap for them. Great.
And we have time for one more question.
Thank you for your presentation. It was excellent. I'm curious to know, as you're driving this change and get folks within your organization to adopt IDP, this new IDP platform tool, what was the hardest thing to do?
As we were driving adoption?
Yeah. Yes.
Understanding the actual pain points. Because like the same concept as one size fit all does not work, it was also not that the adoption reason was generic across all the teams. So we had to work individually with every team to understand what was blocking or what was a challenge to drive an adoption for that particular team. Because every team had a different need or a requirement that they wanted the IDP to satisfy for them. So actually putting everything together and consolidating all of that, identifying what the real pain points are. If you noticed, I had a long list of blockers, and that was not because it was like one blocker, each of these blockers were for every team. It was an individual team saying, hey, this is what we expected, but this is not what we got. The other team was, hey, scaffolding was not as easy as we expected. You promised us X time to launch a service, and it did not work. So for us to understand what are all the different areas that we need to be focusing on, and then prioritizing what on those areas should we be actually prioritizing so that we can drive adoption and then build iteratively on it. That was the most challenging part.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you so much.